Wait, is there wait, are there rappers in Russia?
Yeah,
Oh.
definitely. Yeah, I think in the past 5 or 10 years they started resembling more like American hip hop because back in the day it was used to be just a guy screaming to the mic
Uh,
with like no flow and whatever, and then it switched to like modern rap, where
uh,
some might call like trash rap. So now a lot of Russian rappers, they like, especially like Morgenstern. He's probably one of the more popular ones. He does one of those like more trash rap, like you know how modern it is. Like
mhm. Okay.
I gotta let you. I
Oh
listen
yeah.
to one of his
I
songs.
started recording just because I always like to have like a little hook. Hey everybody, while he looks that up, welcome back to another episode of the Peasant Party Podcast. I'm your host Charlotte Warren. I've got a fantastic guest in studio with me who is looking up Russian rappers for us because rap exists in Russia. This guy is so cool. Okay, introduce yourself as you look up the Russian rappers.
Yeah. Hello everyone. My name is Valentine at the Primetime Valentine, and I'm here to tell my story.
I'm so excited for it. And I guess I'll give some background about how I found you on TikTok. And I know you're kind of you're doing some like travel right now. And I was like, yeah, like please come on the podcast if you're in the area. But I think I found you. So like, obviously my TikTok niche is making silly, deranged dating charts. And I had one where it was like actively going on dates is dating. Like that's not a talking stage. And I think you did a stitch where it was, you're like, if you're going on dates, you're dating. And of course, like, I think like, you know, English, not your first language. You're like, why wouldn't you call that dating? And I thought it was
Yeah.
really funny. I've kind of also seen like your TikTok journey kind of going from, you know, maybe following like, you know, kind of one certain viewpoint and then kind of saying, you know, hey, this is a really like negative way to look at dating. Here's, you know, glow up. And then it's just become like you traveling, like doing cool stuff. Like you literally look like you live like the most fun life. Like every time I see you on Instagram, you're like making some cool cocktail or you're like at some like concert and then you're like in Italy and then it's like this kid is so cool. So
Well, yeah.
that was my ADHD description of how I know you.
Yeah, I definitely know how to show a fun lifestyle, and like many make it seem like it's fun when in reality, I said it. I live a very sad lifestyle. You know, living at home all alone with my dog. No, I'm kidding, but I definitely do try to mix it up a bit because sometimes it gets a little boring, and I don't understand people who just live like just the life from day to day. Just it becomes monotonous, and they just get in a rhythm, and they just for years live like that. And for me, it's like, how do you not get bored out of your mind? So I try to mix it up some once in a while, travel or do something fun, even if it isn't traveling to like a different state or country. Definitely something like driving somewhere like 10 or 20 minutes away to some park and go hiking, or visit like a new dog park to go to with my dog with. So
What's your dog's name?
Nikos.
Nice name.
Yeah, he's
That's a cute dog. I love Shiba Inus.
Shiba Inu. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he's very very stubborn, but he's a very good looking young man and gets a lot of compliments for that. But definitely for Shiba Inus is definitely a good dog for introverts. But you have to be very strict, because if you're too nice and he sees that, he will take advantage. Like he takes advantage of my mom a lot, because she's a very nice lady, sometimes a little too nice. So he takes advantage of that by, pulling her, or she tells him to do something. He's like, just looks at her like, hell no. So with him, you got to be very strict. If he starts pulling, you're like, no pulling, just pull back. Like, no pulling. Come here. So
I had to teach those lessons to my dog and she still hasn't learned. Everyone says like my dog takes after me, just like
yeah.
stubborn, kind of aloof. Classic. So okay, I think everyone's probably going to know, like, what's your story? Where are you from? Obviously, you are from Russia. That is a huge country. That was just the most like ignorant American thing I could say. Tell me about where you're from. How, like, just let's start from the beginning. What is your story?
Yeah, so my story is both my parents are from Russia, and I technically was born here, but I have lived in Russia many years. Have attended school there, and before the whole war started, I have tried to visit at least once a year to just see family, see the friends, and explore Moscow, because Moscow is definitely a very beautiful city, especially if you're like in the center, near the center, within the. Because there's the first inner circle and there's a second outer circle. So if you're going anywhere around there, is very nice and very clean. But of course, these big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg don't represent all of Russia. I feel like Moscow and St. Petersburg are more Europeanized. They're very European, and a lot of people make the mistake of saying, "Oh, this is what Russia is about." If that's actually one of the things where I see a lot of creators say like, "Oh, I'm moving east. In the east, look, it's so much better." They're more traditional, less woke, and look how I'm living. And in reality, is this that's only the reality of like big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. If you go outside of them, life isn't as spectacular, and mostly people living, in villages and living very poor life. So it's definitely, uh, it's perception is not the same like a lot of people make it seem. But if you do have money and you do live in the city, then of course anywhere it's going to be like that. And the same could be said for America, for example. A lot of people complain about, oh, America, the women, they're so modern, not traditional. They're, it's a waste of time. Go to other countries where women are more traditional. But then again, if you compare things like Moscow, I've visited a couple times. I've dated there too. Like if you live in Moscow, Moscow isn't as traditional as you might think. Just like in any American city, the whole concept of hookup culture and keeping things like casual, that's something that also exists in Moscow. And I went on dates with women talking about how, where I would bring this up, be like, oh, Russia, it's traditional, and they were like, oh, no. I went on dates with many men that talked about the casual fling, be like, oh, you want to keep it casual and stuff like that. It's not to say there aren't traditional women living in Moscow, but the same could be said for America, where in the cities, the dating scene how it is. But if you go to like the Midwest or to like more rural areas, the women there, of course, are going to be more traditional. So that's why I don't really agree as much with the whole concept of going abroad to find a traditional wife, because I think you can find what you're looking for within your own country. You just have to know where to look for it.
Exactly. And I think like what's kind of interesting too is like I think a lot of people are the same everywhere, and like I think we all like think the grass is greener. But it was funny, like I think people like there's that saying of like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like I saw like the Priscilla like Elvis movie on Friday, and it was funny because like Elvis came in, he's like using the excuses of like, oh, like, sorry, baby, I'm so busy, I'm so tired and stuff. And he's cheating on his wife and stuff. And it's funny because it's almost like the same excuses like you hear nowadays. And it's like, I wonder if like when the Declaration of Independence and stuff like that was being signed, like some guys telling this like colonial woman, like, oh, the British are coming, I can't tonight. Like, I feel like it's always been that way. And I think it's funny because when you're on TikTok and you see like kids in other countries, it's like Gen Z is the same everywhere. So I think like if you just give people more options and abundance in any case, like, it changes people, regardless of, where you are or, the time period you're in. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's basically the thing about the passport bros. I think we talked about that before, where they're talking about, oh, let's moving outside America. That's how you find a wife. America is the West. The West is doomed. The West, there's no point in getting married and stuff like that to these women. But then again, like I said, it's knowing where to look for it, because you can definitely go to some other country outside of America, to like a more urban area, and you can still find the same things you find in America. But to be fair, there is definitely more prevalence of like feminism in the West, in like America and stuff, than it is in other countries. But that's not to say that you can't find what you're looking for within the West. It's not as, I guess you can make the argument, it's not as prevalent as it is in other countries, because other countries are more conservative, more traditional than the West. But that's not to say that the West is doomed and you can't find what you look for. You can find what you're looking for anywhere, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would totally agree with that. Like, I think there's definitely this kind of, and I don't know where like the romanticized view of, lonely guys maybe aren't having the best time dating in the U.S., thinking I can just go abroad and, there's just going to be a woman there waiting for me. And it's like, like I don't, that's not really how it goes. I like my personal take on the whole passport bro, like thing that comes up, and I feel like I kind of stick out of it because I am a white woman living in the US. It's kind of like not, maybe not my place to chime in. But like my personal take on it is it almost feels like the people that are, the men that want to be passport bros so badly, where they're like, all the women here, like they're not traditional, all of that. who think they can just fly to another country and there's going to be a woman waiting for them to clean their house that like has no life
A
skills.
line of women just waiting.
Yeah, like it's like there's a version of guy that like thinks that, and then like at the same time, like the group of people that are that maybe it's usually women who are like, no, don't be passport bros. You're trying to take advantage of the women that live in these countries who don't know any better. It's like they're almost like two sides of this. It's like the horseshoe theory in politics, where the people on both extremes are basically like agree with the same thing, where they're both calling women in these countries stupid, or they're saying they're not educated, when in reality, like, traditional is not a synonym for uneducated and things like that. Like, women in the Philippines, for example, is a popular passport bro country. They're highly educated. They all speak English, like in all these countries too. Like they speak English, they're very smart. And it's like traditional more means, to me, when I hear that, you grow up learning grandma's family recipe because grandma lives down the street in a way that, she might not in America, where people move far away from their families and you don't have that sort of like from the beginning, if that makes sense. Because I have never met a dumb Russian. I've never met a Russian who didn't terrify me. Like, whenever I've like worked at a company, it's like there's like 3 analysts, like all the tech companies I've worked at, like 3 or 4 where they like have like Russian last names, and they are like the most like intimidating, strong people ever. They are the greatest cooks ever because they grew up learning grandma's recipes, but like they're very smart. And if someone, I feel like if you're saying like, oh, like all the women in Russia are just demure and stuff, it's like, no, there's some very strong women. Like I would be very intimidated before trying to like date Russian women if I were a dude.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not. I definitely I'm not against passport bros. More so I think I support it, but there are caveats.
Yeah.
To it. Like I don't support like you said, the American women saying, oh, they're going abroad because they're less educated and like sex tourism, whatever. It is true sometimes that does happen, but that doesn't mean that if a guy decides to do that he automatically is doing that to take advantage of them. And like you said, abroad there are many educated women. I mean, we had the bromad guy.
Yeah, digital bromad. I like him.
Yeah, he has definitely made a lot of videos where he's in different countries with different women. He also got accused of that, and then it got so bad that the women had to go out and actually speak out, be like, hey, that's actually kind of hurtful. They're calling me and other women, uneducated, when in reality, me, for example, I am very educated. I have a master's and have a job and this and that. So definitely don't support that. But also the other side of the spectrum where men think, oh, the grass is green on the other side, that if they go abroad, then everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows. But in reality, like, I think Angela made a good point about this when she went on a podcast where she talked about like the reality, like if you want to be a passport bro, but you're out of shape, you don't have any money, you don't work on your style, your looks, something bare minimum, like having a clean cut haircut, dressing like more or less stylish. And there's a misconception for some guys that if you go abroad, that women will just accept you as you are, and just because you're a white American, and suddenly they're gonna be lining up like. No, I mean that will be true, but for like the gold diggers, they hear that you're white American, like, oh, passport, and that's gonna be true. They're gonna come for you only for your passport. So you marry them, they get the American passport, bring you back. So that's the argument that some use who are against them, like especially the women here. They say, oh, they're just with you for your passport. Well, that could be true for some, but if you actually work on yourself, like we discussed, the dollar goes a long way abroad. So you don't even have to earn a lot of money. You just have to earn some money for you to be able to go to a different country and take advantage of the advantages, the dollar. Power of the dollar over abroad. But also, if you want to attract the high quality women that you want abroad, you also have to be a high quality man yourself, because no woman abroad wants an average American guy who has nothing going for him. Something simple as just having like personality. You don't have to be a good looking guy. You don't have to be tall. You just have to be a genuine nice guy who a woman would find enjoyable being with you. And knowing the language is also something that could be an invitation. I mean, if you have a plan in your idea to move somewhere specifically, like if you want to move to like South America, say, or Central America, then if you actually try to at least learn some Spanish, that'll also be very advantageous for you. Because if you just go abroad and just speak English,
You're an American.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're going abroad and you just speak English, then some women don't speak English. I mean, we do talk about that. There's a lot of women who do speak English abroad, but that's not true for all of them. So if you at least try to make the effort, it could go a long way. So.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think, yeah, like to do that, like you'd have to have immense respect for the cultures you're going to, make an effort to like learn the language. Like, that's why I do like kind of the digital like what the digital bromad does is first is like, it's not like he went out there like, I'm here to find women. He like had a remote job. Like you can also just tell like, this is a guy who like if he were in the US, he would have no problem dating. He'd have a lot of friends. Like he just seems like a person who's just fun to be around. Like just seems very likable. And like I think he hosts like a Beers and Peers, like learn Spanish happy hour or something when he was like living in Colombia. It's like, it's more around like, hey, I'm here to see the culture. And what do you know? Like the women here are really nice too. And so he's kind of like integrated that in. Like he didn't go out there saying like, where's my future wife or anything like that. It was, I'm going to get this cultural experience for me. Cause I think that's another part of the passport because there's like one side of it where it's like, young guys like going out and seeing the world, like educated guys, who have got work to a point where they've got this remote job. Why not see the world and see what happens? Like I would advocate that for anyone, like get out of your comfort zone, like live somewhere else. I think that's really cool. Like I have a younger brother who's a senior in college, and if he were to do something like that, like I would think that was really cool. Like, yeah, go live in another country for a year and, learn the language, like learn another culture. I think that's like a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things you can do. But, learning about the culture is definitely important, being respectful about the people in the culture where you decide you want to live, or you're living like if you're doing a remote job and you're living abroad, it's definitely important to not perpetuate the stereotype of an American and, being, loud, disrespectful, not respecting the culture, not even trying to learn the language. Like for me personally, I've always had an interest in, the Mexican culture and the language, and of course the women. I mean, come on. And for many years in school, and I still try to keep up, and that's why I have a trip planned for Medellin because I've heard a lot about it, and I've been trying to ramp up my Spanish porque yo puedo hablar español.
Oh, shit, you're good at this.
Es muy importante saber español para visitar Colombia. So
see, my Spanish is terrible.
So yeah, I've been learning Spanish for many years in school, in university, but after university I kind of stopped because the thing about language, just like any other skill, if you don't use it all the time, you're going to start losing it year over year. So now I'm trying to ramp it back up, trying to remember the things. So I actually started using Duolingo.
Nice.
Yeah, it's some people say it's bad, some people say it's good, but for me, I enjoy it because it feels like a game, almost where it knows how to keep you in the loop and be on the app, such as the streaks, and they have the little rankings where the more points you have, the higher you are on the leaderboard, and then the top 7 move on to the next league. So I think even though you might make the argument that Duolingo was not the best app for language learning, it is definitely a good app for at least starting to learn a language and to be consistent with it, because consistency is key. It might not be the best app, it might not be the best method of learning, but as long as there's consistency involved, it'll go a long way and will be much better than any other app where it's scientifically like better, but not gonna be consistent with it because it's boring. Like Babbel. Like I was thinking about Babbel, but I looked at the format of it and I was like, oof, this is very boring, because you use the little pictures, you click, and it's like, yeah, cool, yeah, it might be better, but you fall asleep halfway through and you're like, ugh.
Yeah, I had to do Rosetta Stone when I did Spanish in high school, and like I'm pretty sure that made me never want to learn a language. I was like, fuck this shit. Yeah, no, like I know Duolingo is like fun for like little games to like kind of keep you on your toes, kind of like doing a crossword puzzle or something. I feel like yeah, if you were to give, because I feel like you travel a lot, like you've met women of all backgrounds, it seems like you're enjoying your life. If you had like 3 tips for guys your own age about traveling and, you know, maybe meeting a lovely woman in the process, like what advice would you have? And then maybe like some advice if, you know, someone's saying, I want to go to, like, I want to go date a Russian woman. What advice would you have for them?
Well, my first advice would be don't. But but my top three would my first one would definitely be, and something that started learning, started leaning into it, is don't be afraid to go somewhere alone. Because I feel like you learn the most and you really get out of your comfort zone if you do something alone. Because if you keep waiting, where it's like, oh, does somebody want to go with me? Do you want to go? No, you're busy. Do you want to go? Oh, you don't have any money. And then you're just left there like sitting in place complacent, and you're waiting for somebody to go with you somewhere, and what you end up doing is just wasting time. And for me, I mean, I understand for some people it might be something very, you know, something very out there. It might be uncomfortable. You might be thinking, oh, people are going to judge you. But even if you don't end up enjoying it and you're like, okay, this is not for me, the fact that you take that first step, it builds character. It really shows that you are able to go outside your comfort zone and try new things. And that's what I've been doing recently, is just I got tired of waiting. I got tired of going with somebody to travel when because also the problem with traveling with somebody and you're like, anybody please come with me, is that sometimes you're not compatible with the person you're traveling. I think that's very also important, that with the person you're traveling you have to be compatible. Because if you are more laid back and you like to, you know, enjoy the scenery and walk through and take your time, but the other person's like, all right, we got an agenda, we got to go here, and there, why are you laying down, come on, we can't waste time, we got a time, then you're going to find it annoying, and you're going to find it much more enjoyable if you go alone at your own pace. And that's what I find, because this is, I think, my second trip that I did alone. My very first one was to New York, and it was, you know, rattling like, oh my God, it's my first time. But I did it, and I was like, oh, it's actually not that bad.
Not bad, yeah.
So this is my second time traveling somewhere alone, and, you know, some people, it might get lonely at times, but for me, not really. I actually enjoy, I guess you could say, that's like a very, because you're an introvert, yada, yada. But for me, I think it's very, very interesting, and it's also a way you learn how to be alone. I think that's very important, and being confident, being alone and doing things, and that's the advice. And so when you go out, you actually try. Like, for example, if you want to go out and, you know, learn how to pick up women, or you want to improve your confidence when you're talking to women, if you go out alone, it forces you to interact. Because if you're out with your group of buddies, I found that myself, where I'm like, all right, I'm committed, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna practice, and then I go out, and you get a little nervous, and you just resort to being with your little group. It's like, oh yeah, and then the whole point of the night was just wasted. But if you go out alone and you don't want to be awkward just standing there alone, you're like, oh, well, I guess I gotta go talk, and then you go and you talk, and again, it builds experience, it builds character, and you learn how to do it. And that's one thing I find is very important. If you want to learn to do something or to practice, it's cool. Like, it might seem weird, like, oh, going out alone, but I promise you, people, almost no person cares about you. You're not important enough for people to be like, oh, look at that guy.
No one cares at all. What is, okay, so you're out about, like, you know, great way to meet women. What's your favorite thing? Like, if you see a woman you find attractive, like, what's your kind of go-to approach?
I definitely, like, I think the first step is to be aware of situational awareness, and to know what setting you're in, who the woman is with, and what she's doing, and stuff like that. And I prefer to, it's not always the case, especially if you go out to like a bar or a club scene, because most women are not comfortable with going out alone, being in the group. But if you do, my preference is, if I see a woman sitting alone, like, say, not even like at a bar or a club, like, say she's sitting alone outside and she's, you know, studying, or she's reading a book and whatever, that's a perfect opportunity to just walk up and be like, oh, hey, well, what book are you reading? Oh, that's cool. Do you mind if I sit here? What's your name? Oh, boom, boom. And you start talking. And once you get in the conversation, she feels more comfortable with you. And that's when you're like, oh, But by the way, I would love to keep in contact with you. What is your number? Or what is your Instagram? Whatever. And even if she says, "Oh, sorry, I have a boyfriend," well, it's
it's not
practice.
personal too
Yeah.
if it happens like that early, because like my sister's talked to like on here because she's like an artist and stuff, so sometimes she would enjoy going like just for a change of scenery, like doing art. Sometimes it would be like out at a patio at a bar, like she would kind of go off somewhere, but sometimes like guys would approach her and she was like, she's mid drawing and she's like, hey, like, I'm sorry, and she's like, it's never personal when I do that, and she's like, it's always like, I don't know anything about this guy. There's nothing for like, there's nothing for me to reject him for. It's just like, oh, I came out here to
Yeah.
do art with headphones in, and I know people might approach me that way, but like I think she kind of put out the word of like, if a woman approaches you without even knowing anything about you, it's not personal. Like if she says like, oh hey, like I'm kind of doing my own thing.
Yeah, and a lot of guys, the mistake that they make is sometimes they get a little too ahead of it, and they just approach a woman and say, "Oh, I thought you're beautiful. Can I get your number?" And it's like, that's not a very good approach, because imagine you're just standing there all alone, and some guy just approaches you, be like, "Oh, hey, I think you're cute. Can you give me your number?" And you're gonna be taken aback. It's like, okay, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
What do you want? But if you take the time to build that relationship, then she's gonna feel more comfortable and be like, "Oh, okay, so he is this guy. His name is this, and this is my first impression of him." So you're gonna have much better success if you build that rapport with the woman, especially if it's like somebody you don't know, just random on the street or like stuff like that. It's definitely important to build that rapport, because I mean, imagine you're a random. I mean, I guess it's different for a guy. If a woman just approaches you, be like, "Hey, I think you're cute. Can you give me a number?" And I'll be, "Oh, sure, yeah." Because yeah, again, it's different for guys
Yeah.
and girls, but for women, it makes sense because women get approached a lot. I mean, a man almost never gets approached. So when he does get approached, he's like, "Oh my god."
That's why they look so scared. Like it's like, what's going on? Like, am I being punked? Like,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
friends put you up to this?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
where's the camera? Wait,
Yeah.
is there as a prank? But
Yeah.
a woman get approached a lot, especially if you're like attractive woman. You're used to getting approached a lot, so a woman's job when somebody approaches is to narrow down the field, because so many guys approach. So she has the choice of which one she likes, which one she doesn't, and she's gotta narrow it down. But for a guy, his whole point is to approach as many women so he can have more success in getting a number and whatever. But it also depends on your goals. If your goal is to just approach somebody that you actually like and want to get to know to, you can be more picky. Like for me, I don't really do that. I don't just go off in different directions like those like pickup artists on like YouTube and TikTok.
Yeah.
They're just standing on the street and just talking to random women, trying to get as many numbers. Like that's cool, like law of averages. But if you're just an ordinary guy just walking through life, and then you're just walking and you see that one girl, you're like, "Oh, okay, cool. Let me approach her." And you approach her, and it doesn't work out. All right, cool, whatever. You go
Yeah.
through life and you see another one, you approach. So I can't really say I would support the whole idea of just standing on a public street and just seeking, like, you're hunting for a woman. Okay, I'm gonna approach her. Okay, next I'm gonna approach her. Like, sure, you can make the argument that practice makes perfect and it builds confidence, but I guess you can also make the argument it's kind of predatory too.
Yeah, it's also like people are walking somewhere with a purpose. Like I know some people like don't drink and stuff, but I always tell people to go to, like, if you're in a bar, just like what are you drinking? If it's like a cool place, like if you're at the Garage Bar, which you got to go to, one of my favorite bars, like, what are you drinking? Because it's like a cool drink. It's like, what is that? Like there's all these things on the menu. What is what item? And like if she like says vodka soda and then turns back to her friends like vodka soda period, probably doesn't want to talk to you. If she like wants to talk to you, it's it's this, like it has this and this in it. What are you thinking of drinking? And then all of a sudden conversation starts. Like a lot of like, what's this? Like I always tell people too, like wear like a shirt, like wear something that has a conversation starter on it. Like if it's like, Sunday football, like wear something of your team. Like even if someone's just coming to you to talk shit and be like, fuck the Niners or something like that, it's like, that's still playful. It's a conversation that got started. Or like if they're wearing something like a band t-shirt, it's like, oh, you like the so-and-sos? Like I always think those are just easy ways to start conversation. Like people at bars like are there because they're at ease. Like they're not in a rush to get anywhere. Like I always think that's a good move.
Funny enough, you mentioned that. Actually, when I went to the Garage, they got seated at the bar, and there was a woman sitting right next to me. She was all alone. I looked like, oh, okay, so she's sitting alone having a drink. That's unusual in these days, but it does happen. So you know, if you go out to a bar, there could be an opportunity where a woman is just alone.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I was sitting there and I wasn't in the mind space to like talk to anybody, pick
Mm-hmm.
up whatever. I kind of moved on from all that. I'm kind of tired of whole dating thing. So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, you
Yeah,
know,
chilling.
chilling, you know, focusing on myself, traveling, stuff like that. But in that moment, I was, you know, I was alone. I was looking at the menu, and the menu is like pretty weird. It has all these fancy names.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any of these
Yeah.
drinks. And then, I mean, you can read the ingredients, but it's like so overwhelming because
Mm-hmm.
it's so many ingredients and so many drinks. So it's
Yeah,
like,
it forces you to like look around and be like, what drink is that? What
yeah,
drink
yeah.
is that? Like you make a key of what everyone's drinking.
Yeah,
Like,
so I literally looked to my left and there was the girl and she was having a drink. So I literally was like, excuse me, what kind of drink is that? She's like, oh, this is this. And then she literally went over and pointed on the menu. She was like, oh, it's this one right here. I was like, oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see it says Scotch. Oh, so you're a Scotch drinker, huh? She's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. And then at that point, you know, the thing about approaching, having a conversation is
Mm-hmm.
you also have to be, it goes back to situational awareness, is gauging whether the woman is interested or not. And one of those things is also if she continues the conversation.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, I talked to her a little and oh, you like this, you like, you know, you're a Scotch drinker and this and that. And then I paused. And then she started asking me a question, starting a conversation with me, saying, "Oh, what kind of liquor do you like?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, whiskey too. So I think I like this." And I was like, "You know what? You've convinced me. I'm gonna order this." And then from there, the conversation went on, and we talked. You know, she talked about herself, talked about myself, about our background, and you know, it's been a good night. And she was like a very busy woman. She's like, oh, I have this and that. I have a project due on Thursday, and probably gonna work through the weekend. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Well, you know what? Let me get Instagram. If you know, you have any free
Nice.
time, we can, you know, we can
Nice.
interact. So the thing about talking to women and trying to like pick up women per se is it doesn't have to go anywhere immediately, especially at a bar or club. Some men have this perception that, oh, you have to pick her up there. If she doesn't go home with you, then, you know, move on to the next one. It's like, it's not like, I guess if you're more into like hookups and one night stands, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to eventually happen. I mean, sometimes a woman could be very down at that moment and be like, oh, you want to go back to my place? But sometimes, you know, many women are very precarious about
Yeah.
who this person is. Like,
Oh,
do I want
100%.
to? So if you know, build that rapport with her and get her number, and then later you continue talking and you go on another dates, and then eventually, you know, she becomes more comfortable with you, and then she decides, do I like him? Do I not? Is he one night stand material? Is he boyfriend material? Stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Oh, totally. And like, yeah, like I would almost worry like if a woman was too eager, it'd be like, what's kind of the I'd be a little suspicious. I'd be like, are you gonna steal my organs or something like that?
especially in Colombia, like guys, if any of you decide to go to Colombia, especially Medellin, there's no hookup culture there per se. So if a woman's very eager to take you home, just be aware it could be a situation of like
Stealing your wallet.
stealing your wallet, because there's a lot of American men stories about that where they go to like these countries and they go out to the clubs and they pick up women and say, oh damn, she's down, you know, take back to my place. And then what happens is she goes back to your place, she asks for a drink, and then while you're not looking, she puts something in your drink, and
Oh,
then
is
you get knocked
scopolamine
out.
stuff?
And then when you wake up, your whole apartment is cleaned out.
Oh,
So what she does is she drugs you, and then she texts her guy group, is like, oh, okay, come in, and then they barge in, and then just steal all your stuff.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I think it's like, isn't it the scopolamine where it's like it's the stuff where it's like they can like literally like be like open the safe and then you just like do it.
Yeah.
That stuff
There's
is
this
so
whole
sketch.
situation of where you can be knocked out, but you can also be a situation where your consciousness is knocked out, where you're doing things but you're not aware, and you wake up, you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is the whole organ stealing
Yeah.
thing, where they put you in the bath and they take your organs. That's the worst case scenario. Best
Don't
case,
lose
you
your
just get
organs,
robbed. So be careful, be very diligent. So if a woman's very too, like, she's too eager,
She's too eager, it's too good to be true. That's what they
Like, if
say.
it's too
Like your
good to be
mom
true,
always
yeah.
says growing up, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
yeah.
Exactly. Oh fuck, I had a question. I forgot where I was going with it. Oh yeah, because something you did really cool, and we totally didn't talk about this like beforehand, but you took like classes on how to become like a very good like bartender cocktail person. Didn't
Oh yeah. So the story with that is, I never really had this idea of, oh, I want to become a bartender or whatever. But one time my friend, he was like, oh, let's go to this cafe,
Mm-hmm.
let's work at this cafe, because he also works remote, I work remote. So he was like, oh, let's
Mm-hmm.
go to a cafe. I was like, oh, sure, why not? It's a cafe I've never been to, and it's like walking distance, so let's go there. So I walk there, and we sit down at a table, and literally right across the road from it, staring at me a building that says professional bartending school. And I was like, hmm, you know what, I never thought about that. And I started researching and seeing what it offer. And it was very expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but if you know a thing or two about bartending, then you know
Mm-hmm.
that it can be very lucrative, especially if you do
Mm-hmm.
it on like the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, this is expensive, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
probably get my money back. So, you know what? Why not? Even
Mm-hmm.
if I don't decide to be a bartender, it's still a very cool
Oh, for
skill to
sure.
have. So I just did the 5 week once
Mm-hmm.
at once every Saturday. It was like a 9 to 5 kind of class with a
Mm-hmm.
break for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And then I graduated, and I started walking around the different bars in my area.
Mm-hmm.
And then I walked into one bar. I was like, oh, looking for a bartender. Here's my resume. And I created a whole resume. And
Nice.
the thing about bartending resumes, they're very different from like
Oh yeah.
work resumes, because with work resumes, they have to be very professional, very polished, just text, no pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure there's no pictures if you're working for like an office,
Mm-hmm.
because pictures are more so for creative
Mm-hmm.
jobs. Like, say you want to be a web designer, sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a bartender, it's very cool to have a picture and
Mm-hmm.
have all this creative wacky
Mm-hmm.
design, and have it list. And I give her my resume and be like, I don't have any job experience, but I graduated from the bartending school. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also important to know how to advertise yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And
You got to sell yourself as almost like a character or an
yeah,
actor, because it's like part of it's the experience. It's not just can you make a drink, it's can you make the people feel at home.
yeah, and it's also advertising yourself to have like the skills. You can just say, oh, I attended bartending school, all right.
Yeah.
But you say, I attended bartending school, and these are the skills that I've developed.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to make 120 drinks, and I also have a beer knowledge, liquor
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, and I have done these modules. There's some kind of thing called Diageo modules for
Mm-hmm.
bartenders. So I
Yeah.
have the Diageo modules and this and that. And if you to compare, oh, I did a bartending school, and I did a bartending school, and I have all these skills,
Mm-hmm.
then that makes you stand out. And she took a chance and she hired me, and then I became a bartender. And literally in 1 week, I made back the $600 I paid for bartending school. So
Nice.
it
I
was very advantageous.
Totally. And I feel like that's a great way to meet people. It's also just like a great party trick to have. Like, it's like you go, so a friend has a party and you're the one that knows how to like cut the orange peels the right way and make like the bitters and stuff. Like, I feel like women love that too. It's like a guy's like, oh, here, let me make you a drink. And then they're like, oh, what kind of drink is this? Oh, yeah. Like, I know how to make 1,000,000,001 different drinks. Like, it's a good skill to have. Like, I feel like it's just a good party trick. It makes you just a more well-rounded, fun person as a whole.
Yeah. As soon as I graduated, every time I would visit my mom, she's like, all right, bartender, make me a drink.
Mm-hmm.
So she took advantage of that very quickly, and she
Mm-hmm.
loves margaritas. So I
Nice.
made her so many margaritas that I'm just a pro. And she's like, oh, margarita.
Love
go.
it. Love it. Wait, are all the rumors true about like Russians liking vodka and having it in the morning with their breakfast, like putting their cereal in vodka?
Yeah, the thing about stereotypes is they're very, they're very broad, and
Mm-hmm.
they focus on the loud minority, the people that pop up. But even though vodka is pretty popular in Russia, it's not to say that every single Russian is a drunk that drinks vodka
Totally.
every single day. There's definitely that culture, like I discussed, like outside of Moscow and St.
Mm-hmm.
Petersburg. There's like a lot of little villages where
Mm-hmm.
people live, in poverty. They have nothing going for them, and what else is there to do, especially if you live in Siberia? What else is there to do besides drinking?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole concept of Russian roulette, where you're thinking like, oh damn,
Oh,
why
yeah,
would
like,
anybody do that?
they got nothing else to do.
Yeah, imagine you're living in the middle of nowhere in Siberia, and it's cold. You're cold. There's nothing to do. Just valleys and snow, and you're freezing. And what else there to do? You drink, and if you get desperate enough, you're like, hey, you want to play a game?
What's
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the most fun you have. Even if the other person shoots himself, is like, oh, nice, cool,
Nice.
cool.
Cool.
Yeah,
Like,
because that's at least some entertainment. Imagine you're sitting in your room all day with nothing to do. You don't have your phone, you have your computer. That's actually how what's the actor's name? The one who played Joker in the
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger. Yeah, that's actually how Heath Ledger prepared for his role in Joker, where he would lock himself in a room for weeks on end, and he would become so like crazy because imagine you're locked in a room for weeks with nothing to do. After a while, people break like mentally, and they start hearing voices and stuff, and that's how he was able to portray the character so well, is because he drove himself crazy.
Yeah.
So,
No, totally.
imagine that, but you are living in Siberia, and that same concept where you're living in the middle of nowhere. All you have is your buddy, who's also on shift guard, and there's literally nothing to do. There's especially back in the day in the Soviet days, there's no phone, there's no computer. You have nothing. You just have
vodka and
just
guns.
watching, and then you go crazy after a while. And be like, hey, you want to shoot? You want to see who shoots those first?
That'd be very like funny, but also like, well, no, it's not funny, but like kind of funny.
Wow, you're a psychopath.
I'm such a psychopath. But no, we've talked about all the fun stuff you do. Like, let's talk business, because you're working on something really cool, and I'll hold up the T-shirt right now. What is Vanalytics? Tell us about what you're working on right now, because you've got I'm covering it. Yeah, you can scan this QR code for a website that doesn't work yet, but it will soon.
Well,
tell me about it.
Yeah, you can definitely scan the QR code, but the website, to get into website, the code is Vanalytics. You just type in password Vanalytics, all lowercase, and you'll get access to this website. But I basically, on the side, I started a company called Vanalytics, which is basically helping small businesses unlock the power of their data. And I've noticed that a lot of analytics companies, they focus a lot on big companies, which makes sense. They have the most budget, the bigger money, but the small businesses often get overlooked. So I decided to create a business that's helping companies with their data, so data management, data analysis, anything of that sort, and helping small businesses help make sense of their data and to help them propel their success. Because if you ever own a small business, you know how hard it is to run something like that, and especially if you don't have any business experience, and you don't know, for example, you're running a business and you don't know why you don't have a lot of retention from your customers. But if you look into your data and you see, like, for example, if you see that a lot there's like spikes in data, so you have a lot of sales in the summer and then it just drops in the winter, be like, okay, so I have a seasonal business, and for me to have better success, I should focus all my marketing on the winter months when people don't buy my product as much. Summer months, you don't have to do any marketing because people, go to your business and they take advantage. But it's very important to know what the data says and to collect a lot of data from customers, because then you can take that data and propel your business to get more sales and more success. Because if you don't know what's happening in your business, then how are you going to fix the problems?
And I feel like it's so much more, because everyone who's ever started a business or something, you can read the analytics that are like part of that platform. Like I can go read, like you can go and read like how many YouTube subscribers you have, but so much more than that. And why it's good to have a human is it's not just the what of the data, it's the how do we get here and what does this mean? Like, why are we here? That's why that's why these companies spend so much money on analysts, because it's, anyone can make a dashboard and say, okay, here's, numbers are down. Why are the numbers down? How did that happen? What is this measuring? So I think like having someone like you to come in and not just say like, oh, your sales are down, but here's why, here's what it's in. Okay, like let's pivot to this. Here's how we can kind of fix things. And I think that's something that's just so important on top of that.
Yeah, the analysis is definitely part is very important. It's one thing, okay, you have all this raw data, so what? You need somebody to make sense of it, but not only make sense of it, be like, oh, this is what the charts say. Okay, I'll see you later. No, it's showing what the data shows, and then putting your own insight into what the data is showing and what you believe the data is saying and what your recommendations are and how to improve it in that aspect. Say you find a bottleneck and be like, oh yeah, I found this bottleneck, see the chart.
Okay, cool.
You have any questions? No. It's like, hey, I found this bottleneck, here's the chart. Here's how to fix it. Because I looked into the data, I looked at your business, and I saw that, here's the chart for this thing, but I also noticed this other aspect of your business shows, this kind of progression. So I believe that what's causing this bottleneck is this progression of the other data. So for example, even if something as simple as employee management, say you have, you have some employees and you want to find out some insights from your employees. Say you want to find out what is the retention rate of your employees. You want to know if if the retention rate is high or low. You want to know why. Like if it, you never know. Especially if you're working like a mid-sized company, there's probably a lot of employees, and you don't notice people coming and going, but then you notice, oh, all right, I have a high retention rate. Why is that? Let me look further, and then try to fix that problem. That's one of the problems I noticed in Amazon. That was actually the very first job I got out of college. They were marketing the area manager position a lot, like to the point that I weirdly got 3 messages from 3 different people for the same position.
Nice.
So that was probably should have been my first red flag, but I took what I got, and they gave a fair starting salary. So I started working, and then my very first day, I remember walking. They were showing us around the factory, and there, I forgot what the situation was exactly, but the guy who's showing me around, he was like, "Oh yeah, I have a lot of managers coming and going." So I was like, that's kind of a red flag.
Red flag.
Why would there be like revolving door managers, and why would they be advertising so much? And then once I started working, I realized you're working in this factory, and it is not the most pleasant, hours, especially if you work like the night shift. And one thing I noticed about being a manager is you don't look at the work. Like there's the workers who, pack the boxes. They work on the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when you're managing, you don't look at people as people. You look at them as numbers.
Oh yeah.
And you're looking at everybody's productivity level. And if somebody is below what is needed, then you have to walk up and be like, "Oh, hey, is everything going well? Oh, I see you're having trouble. Maybe I can help you out with something. Help you. Okay, see, this is how you put the boxes in. Okay, cool. Have a great day." And for me, it felt very fake. And it's like, you're not looking at people as people. You're looking at them as just numbers. And if somebody's doing well, okay, cool. Let them do whatever. And they're not doing well, just be like, "Oh, I got to go talk to them. I got to come off as a friend." Because if you come off as this, authoritarian manager, they're not going to be as receptive.
Yeah,
And
especially when you're the guy that gets like, because I my first job out of college, I was a store manager for Target. Like they have one of those like rotational recent college grad programs. Like to people that are working as like cashiers or like on a sales floor, like they see you as a person that's like sitting down at a computer, and that looks cushy to them. So you can't come in there and like be a hypocrite. You got to like come and like get hands on and like help them and stuff. But yeah, like it's a tough job to do, and like looking at the numbers and be like, "Oh, they're not productive enough." It's like it's a very like fine line between like being human, but also like you got like it's a business. You're trying to run a business.
yeah, it's definitely important to do your due diligence for like, especially for the company you work for in the position, because sometimes these kinds of things happen. Be like, "Oh wow, they want me so bad. They interviewed me, and after the first interview, they gave me the job." You gotta be like, "But why?"
Yeah.
Because after I started working, I noticed that for those area manager positions, they put you in like the factories that have the most problems, and then you come in and they want you, this recent college grad, just come and be like, "Here, fix it."
Yeah.
So I had to go in there and not only run the shifts, but also having to help with whatever bottlenecks are happening with the factory. Like there was this one project I did where there was this section of the factory where it was like piles and piles of like junk, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we need to get rid of that." So go in there, shift through all of them, see should we keep, what should we throw away, and yeah, and stuff like that. And it was definitely very, very fast paced, and they underpay you, so that's how they use college grads, so they can pay you less to do all the work. Like, "Here, fix this factory."
Yeah, and you're like, "Oh, cool, a salaried job," and it's like, "Oh, they do that so that they can keep you there for 12 hours without like overtime stuff."
Yeah, so I'm not surprised Amazon's getting a lot of hate for their
sure.
basically sweatshops, is what people call it. And before I started working as a manager, they want you to work the job that they will work with the boxes, and just one day of working, and I was like, "Oh my god, how do people do this day after day? This is It's just
Yeah.
so annoying.
But the one good thing about those jobs, like, because I did like my, what was it, like probably like a year doing the Target store management, and then I went to tech, like in sales. It's like that keeps you so humble, because the people that graduate and go right into like some cushy tech job, it's like they just get like so entitled, so spoiled so quickly. And it's like in your mind, it's like, I got to earn my job every day. And it makes you like, keeps you humble when some people kind of get spoiled. So I feel like it's like a good first job experience, like before going on to something else. Because you're like, you're always like, nope, like this is a good job. Like you never complain. Like once you find something better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the concept people say that everybody should be required to work like a retail or a restaurant job, because one thing you learn is a lot of people are entitled. That's one thing I noticed when working as a bartender. You definitely notice it more as a server, because for me, I just worry about the people at the bar, and usually the people at the bar, they're pretty chill. But if you work the tables, like I heard a lot of stories from the people who worked as servers while I was working in that industry, and they were talking about a lot of people who were very entitled, and complaining about things that wasn't their issue, or something very minor, and they blew it out of proportion. And it definitely makes you notice how, well, firstly, it's the whole thing about tips. It's a very controversial.
Oh,
It's a
tipping culture is a
tipping
very
culture. Yeah,
big controversial debate right now, I feel
yeah,
like.
but for me, it's like, yeah, sure, it's getting out of pocket and stuff like that, but the culture has already developed. It's not going anywhere unless there's some radical overturn, which it probably won't happen. So, and if people are relying on these tips to, make a living and to live, then you have to tip accordingly. You gotta give an appropriate amount of tips. So for me, obviously, because since I worked in the industry, I try to give a very generous tip. Like more than 20, sometimes 30, and giving at least 20 and being fair. Some people say, oh, he didn't do such a great job, I'm gonna give him 10%, 15%. It's not just about, oh, how am I going to judge this? So it's just about, if they did their
It's
job
polite.
well,
Yeah.
just give them a fair tip, because they rely on that to make a living, and if they don't make enough tips, then some people can't feed their kids, some people can't pay the rent on time, and
Exactly.
it gets problematic. And you can talk all you want about greedy managers or restaurant owners, but that's the truth. And then people have to survive somehow. I mean, people don't go into the restaurant business because they enjoy it, or they're like, oh, this is a dream of mine. No, they go into the becoming a server because they need to earn more money, because maybe their full-time job isn't enough, or they can't find a full-time job. I mean, there's this
It's a
whole,
hard time to find a job right now.
yeah, there's this thing I don't like about the unemployment rate is it gives us a skewed picture of the reality of the American economy, because it's saying, oh, the employment rate is so low,
Yeah.
but in reality,
Underemployment's a thing. Like people that with degrees that are like, I'm going back to serving because I can't find a job
Yeah.
in my field.
but the problem with the unemployment rate is it's not looking at all people who are unemployed. It's only looking at people who are actively looking for a job, who are unemployed. But there are many people who just give up and they file for unemployment, and there's also some people who, like I discussed. But to say that unemployment rate 5% means only 5% of the population is unemployed, it's very skewed. And also the whole concept of the jobs report, where they say, oh, 200,000 jobs have just been created, and you're like, oh wow, why are you having a hard time to find a job? There's so many jobs. But when you look into the numbers, you realize most of those jobs are either in the service industry, retail industry. Almost like a very small minority of those jobs are actually jobs
Yeah.
that are high paying. Like you want an office job, a tech job, like something of that sort, that gives you like a livable wage. That's the reality. People saying, oh, there's so many jobs created, you should be no problem finding a job. And in reality, once you look into what kind of jobs get posted, it's jobs that people don't really want to work. And sometimes it's so bad that people are like urgently hiring, because some people refuse to work, to be underpaid to work these jobs where they get mistreated on the retail and service industry. And some are forced to stay competitive and to offer something, and those that don't, they suffer.
Yeah.
Like the restaurant that I worked at as a bartender, I noticed from the very early on that they were having problems, just based on again, for that restaurant, the management was also a revolving door, just like it was at Amazon. So that was the first red flag, where we got a new manager, and then weeks later he leaves, a new manager comes in. Weeks later he leaves, and I was like, all right, it's not looking
Revolving
good.
doors,
The
yeah.
revolving doors, and it was getting so bad that after the summer kind of season ended, they started cutting people. And well, unfortunately, I was cut too, but because I was only part-time. I was only working the weekend, but they were looking for somebody full-time. I was like, oh, what days can you work? I was like, oh, I can only do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
well, unfortunately, then we can't continue with you, because we're having some financial things, some financial problems. And I was understanding. I knew.
Yeah.
I'm a very perceptive person. I know, when I see problems, I know problems when I see them. The management, and also how the things were running. It got so bad that after they went through a couple of managers, one of the senior people at the company had to come to the bar and manage it and get things done, because things was being so bad. So
Like Bar Rescue. That's a good show.
Oh, I was so obsessed with Bar Rescue. I love the show. I think that was my very first introduction into the restaurant industry, and was probably my very first time the interest in bartending was peaked, because I used to look at how the bartenders, they train them, like, oh, this is a 2 pour count, and this is the cocktail, this is the ingredient. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, this is very nice.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And because I know we kind of talked about different forms of data, how you're looking at the assembly line at Amazon, all of that, and the story behind the data. Something we kind of wanted to look at, and I know that you dove into, is we both talk about dating topics, issues. Something I feel like we see on TikTok a lot is people pointing to studies that are about dating, relationships, society and culture, gender, all of that. People are happier. Are people happier single? How many people are marriage rates going down? I know you pulled up some stuff related to data, and I thought we could maybe dive into one of those studies and kind of take a look at what the story is. Is it what people think it is? I think there were some popular ones, but something I always notice, because my career is in data analytics, more on the marketing side itself, is whenever people pull up those studies, they never seem to tell the full story. I think there's some where it's for example, I think every year, and I think Tinder does this too and stuff like that, but Bumble will publish a survey, for example, where it's of course, when Bumble takes surveys, what do? They have a little pop-up in their app, want to take our end of the year survey, and then they have questions, and then they publish it, and the picture they paint of dating, I feel like, doesn't always reflect dating culture. And I think part of that is because if a company surveys people, for a survey they're gonna put out, they're gonna make themselves look good. I also think things like self-selection on these types of surveys kind of presents kind of a biased result, I would say. I think Bumble put one out where it was all men are in the year 2023, men will be more committed to recognizing boundaries, or just something where it was what kind of phrasing is this? But if you look at it, it's number one, who's going to take Bumble's end of the year survey? Who takes
Right.
Who takes surveys? Nerds take surveys. You couldn't get me to take a survey to save my life. I'm not taking surveys. And of course, if it's a survey they're producing, they have the option to write the questions, for example, in a way that can skew it. That's what's it called? Selection bias is people. Yeah. So people who choose to take surveys anyway are going to be a certain kind of person. So you're going to get a certain type of person taking the survey that maybe won't reflect the masses. And then Bumble can write their questions. They can choose the responses. If it's A, B, C, and D, and they've picked a set list of responses, and people are kind of that's, I guess I'm this one. That can create a biased survey. And then, on top of that, when people do things where they self-identify or they volunteer information about themselves, we all look at ourselves as a star of our own movie. We all see ourselves as the underdog. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they say, you get asked, what are you looking for in a relationship? A lot of us will say, I just want someone kind and thoughtful and all of that. And it would make us sound like really good, wholesome people. And then if you look at what people do and what they maybe go for, it's wait a second, that doesn't line up with what you're doing. So I think when companies like Bumble do that, it's they've kind of produced this data, but wait, how did we get here and why? So I think I think you pulled up a good survey.
Yeah, I think the problem with many of these studies is you have to really look into the dynamics of it, how was it the survey collected, what kind of parameters they had, what they used. For example, a lot of studies talk about how, this things killing you, like coffee is bad for you, if coffee is good for you, or eating too much of this will cause, baldness. But then you look into the study, and the study was done on mice.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, we're not mice. We're nowhere near, like, close enough to mice for us to be able to associate whatever happened to mice is what happened to humans. And also the thing with studies with these, I discussed like Bumble and stuff like that, where they say, like, for example, they say that by the year 2030, like 70% of young people are going to be single. But then you look into what they define as single, and it's just
Legally single.
Legally single, like on your tax forms, you're either single or you're married, and you're like, oh, okay, so that draws a different picture. When if you just read the headline, you're like, oh damn, so most people are going to be single. But you look into the specifics, oh, you mean single like tax wise.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Or for example, the Bumble survey, I mean, like you discussed, not a lot of people take surveys. And the thing about surveys is people only do surveys, or they write reviews usually either when they're like very happy or they're very angry. And when for these surveys, it's most likely done only by people who like are, I guess, they love to share their opinion, or they love Bumble very much, and they do the survey. So the pool of people who actually do the survey, that's why the quality of studies is important, to grasp a whole variety of opinions, people from different walks of life, demographics, men, women, young, old. But the people who take the survey, they might be all of the same caliber. They might be the same kind of people, but they don't represent most people. And things like, for example, like when people like to identify with being, when women, for example, say, oh, I'm looking for a guy who's kind, who's loving, and then in reality, they, looks don't matter, but in reality, they only go for guys who are more or less conventionally attractive. Or when women say, oh, I love a dad bod, but then they go for a guy who's fit. That goes to the point of like female gaze versus male gaze. So I don't, whenever women say I love a dad bod, I wouldn't say they are lying like many men say.
It's just these like euphemisms we come up with that sound really cool on TikTok. What do they actually mean? Like, what is a dad bod? Like, does it just mean like...
Exactly. And it also comes back to the female male gaze. For the female gaze, for women, what they view as a dad bod is a man who, who works out, but he isn't too into fitness. Like, he enjoys cookie here and there.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have defined abs. But for a man, when you tell him dad bod, for him, the perception is, a 40-year-old guy who's overweight, has a beer belly, and it doesn't work out. So that inconsistency causes a strife, and that's why I think it's important to consider who it's from, which point of view it's looked at, and to understand that, okay, so when a woman says she has like a dad bod, she doesn't mean this perception that I think of, she thinks of this perception. So it's very important to know that when men and women are different, and the way they look at things is also very different. That's why there's constantly this war between men and women fighting each other, because it's misunderstanding. Misunderstanding causes conflict.
Oh, totally. And I think too, like, especially if you're going to make a survey and present it very technically, don't use euphemisms where it's the interpretation of what you mean is kind of up in the air. Like dad bod, what is dad bod? Or like what is what is attractive to someone might not be attractive to someone else, or like what is wealthy? Like what are all of these things? So it's like if you're doing surveys, you kind of have to go like very technical. Like if you're asking people for like free responses, like you have to come up with like a good way of like shorthanding these in a way that makes sense to people. Because sometimes too, it's like if you look at who sponsors a certain survey, it's like, they've got an agenda in mind. It's not even just the factors they choose. It's like the conclusions they draw. I think there's like the study that people talk about where it's like, a glass of red wine a day is, makes you live a longer, healthier, happier life. And people are like, oh, it's the red wine. It's like, no, wait a second. To be drinking red wine, you probably have more money in the first place. So it's like, maybe these people are living longer lives, but if you can afford red wine that you're having, a glass of on a nightly basis, maybe you have more money to make other healthy choices. Or things like, women who do equestrian sports are like predisposed, or like are going to live 20 years longer than women who don't. What does it take to do equestrian sports? A lot of money. So they've got money to spend in other places as well. So it's like, it's kind of interesting how those like conclusions can be drawn, and you have to go, wait a second.
Right, and it's also the phrasing of the question. I think one that I really liked is when the phrasing is done for like a question, for example, on things like abortion.
Hmm.
If you phrase the question saying, "Are you for or against abortion?" Is the very different than saying, "Are you for or against killing unborn babies?"
Hmm.
Like it might mean the same thing, but the
Hmm.
phrasing of it makes it seem very different, and people are more likely
Hmm.
to react like, "Oh no, I don't want to kill." They don't want to seem
Hmm.
like the bad person. Like, "Oh, I don't want to kill babies." But when you phrase it like just, it's also important the way you phrase it. If
Hmm.
you phrasing it as in very middle ground, just like
Hmm.
very like this. What is your opinion on this subject? Versus taking a very emotional side, be like,
Hmm.
"Oh, do you like doing this? Do you like to do that?" And suddenly people, the way you view it of it is different, and suddenly they say, "Oh, see, 80% of people, they don't support abortion," when in
Uh-huh.
reality they phrase the question so emotionally where people would react like, "Oh no, I don't want to seem like the bad person," or like, "Oh no, 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 I don't want to do that."
Oh yeah, or even just like little things like, do you believe it should be legal versus are you for or against abortion? Most people aren't for abortion. It's like, do you think it should be legal? Yes or no. So it's like you have to like read.
Mm,
It's like what were the questions asked? What were the sample sizes? Like I think focus groups. Like if you put everyone in a room together where you can hear other people's answers, people are going to change their answer when they have an audience. Like people are
mm-hmm.
going to choose things that maybe make them sound better. Like we all genuinely, like I genuinely believe everyone thinks they're a good person. Now, what if do we all act like good people? I don't know, but we all usually rationalize whatever it is we do in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's like survey data, I think, is so confusing. Also, like, yeah, like we said, the ones where it's like, people are destined to be single longer. I think things that measure age, I think, have been really deceiving as
Mm-hmm.
well, because a lot of times these studies will be, people ages 18 to 40, and they'll look at people 18 to 40 50 years ago, and then people 18 to 40 today, or 18 to 30. I think 18 to 30 is a very interesting demo to survey. Like, yeah, a lot of people 18 to 30 aren't going to be married now, but a lot of people get married in their 30s, for example. Does that mean if
Mm-hmm.
you're single at 22 that you'll be single in your 30s? Probably not. Like, I think those kinds of studies can be interesting as well. You're measuring the same age bracket years later and then
Mm-hmm.
making a conclusion that people will be single forever as a result of it.
Right, right, and it goes back to that. There was very popular headline
Mm-hmm.
of they got reference to this Pew research about how over 60% of men are single,
Mm-hmm.
and then you look into the data and it's like, oh yeah, so from 18 to 30,
Mm-hmm.
over 60% of men are single. But then again, if you really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, yeah, and the explanation could be is that people, they get into relationships later, they get
Mm-hmm.
married later, and back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
people would get married at 18, at 20, they would get married very early. But
Mm-hmm.
now in this day and age, people wait,
Mm-hmm.
and they wait until they get enough education, they get further enough in their career, or they travel enough before they settle down and have kids. And the same thing could be with relationships. You could make the argument that
Well, it's also the age gap between like married couples is like 2 to 3 years or something like that. So
mm,
it's like, yeah, it's like it's gonna be like, oh, less women are single. Why? It's like, well, you got to account for like, it's usually like slightly off. It's like because the 28-year-old woman's marrying the 32-year-old guy, and he's not accounted for in that study, kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's same thing with relationships. Like
Hmm.
you could make the argument that many men have given up on dating, but
Hmm.
where's the proof of that?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure, you can say this, but oh, look at that, 60% of men. Therefore, the conclusion is all these men are tired of dating. Like, sure, there could be some men who are tired of dating, but that doesn't represent the majority of men. There are many different
Totally.
reasons that could be single. Like,
Hmm.
maybe a guy just wants to wait, like he wants to travel, and to have a relationship and travel is going to be very difficult. Or
Exactly.
he wants to wait until he, like, say he's a traditional man, he wants to wait until he is at that point in his career where he could support
Hmm.
having a woman who's like a housewife taking care of the kids.
Hmm.
And same thing with women. Back in the day, they had to get married because that was the only way they could be supported for financially, because back in the day, women didn't have the opportunity to get an education, get a job, support themselves. So they were reliant upon marriages,
Hmm.
on men who have status and wealth, so they could survive, because otherwise they would not be able to live. But today, women have the opportunity to to work, to study, do whatever they want. So now they're waiting much later in life, where they get to experience life and get whatever education they want, get into the profession they want, and get into the job role that is their dream before they start thinking about getting settled down, getting married. And that's one thing I don't really support about the red pill is they get a bad rap because they talk about all these outdated terminologies about women and saying, oh, a woman once she reaches into her 30s, she's outdated, she's
I'm dying over here. I'm just dead. Yeah, me 30-year-old just rotting away.
Just expired.
I wore black for my own funeral.
Yeah, once a woman reaches over 30, she's expired good. She's no longer. No guy wants her. Men want younger women. Men in their 30s, they want women in their 20s. But it's like, where's the proof of that? Where's the studies done? Like you just pulling out of your bottom side. Like sure, some men do prefer younger women, but that doesn't mean most women or most men do. If you actually look at the studies, many men, they get married closer to their age range. So if a man is 35, 33 years, yeah. So a man could be 35 years old and he would marry a woman who's 32 years old.
Yeah.
So it's also the thing about the loud minority is people like to take few bad apples and say, oh, these people, they represent the whole people, the whole gender, when in reality, if you look into it, most men are not like that.
I think most men are good people. It's just the crazies online are just I don't even know. Wow, like I feel like this conversation just flew by. we are at time, and I wish we could continue this, but where can people follow you, and where can people learn more about Vanalytics? Where can we get some, if someone has a small business, they want their data analyzed, where can they go? I'll hold up my QR code. Give us a parting message. I want people to find you.
So my handles on all the social medias is the Primetime Valentine. So nice. Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. If you want to follow me, give me a follow. So it's trying to figure out the what I want to lean more into for my niche, but follow me along the journey. I'll try different things, and once I find that thing, I'm starting to lean more into the travel and vlogging and showing my life and where I travel, what I do. But for the business, if you are a small business and you would like some help, then you can go to vanalytics.tech and then type in the password Vanalytics, and you can go from there. So give me a follow, and I'll see you guys maybe later.
Woo! Yeah, well, I'll put all your stuff in there. Everyone follow. Go get your business data analyzed by this cool guy right here.
Of your data.
Woo! Let's go team. All right, let's go get some lunch. All right, over and out, everyone. Peace.